My name is Matthew Hammond. Stand-up philosophy.
Stand-up philosophy is where I take books out of context. I misquote philosophers appallingly. I turn them into performance pieces. Those of you who may or may not have seen a previous show, I did a backwards reading from the history of justice, starting with Deleuze and ending up with Socrates. But this is quite a different show. I've built it as strange journeys. And what I suppose I mean by that is I'm taking philosophers out of the context to which they usually understood and setting them spinning in different directions. But when I actually looked at who I'm doing tonight, I thought I probably misnamed it. I should be doing this in one of my other acts. Storytelling. Roll up the ideal breaker's yard. Have you ever wondered what happens to an idea when it gets past its sell-by date, when people aren't interested in it anymore? It comes to me. And if it's hopeless, I just break it and it's done with. If it's any good, I salvage what I can. And those that are good, I restore. I give them a new concept, a new dilemma, and I set them spinning back into the world. I do ideas ancient and modern. I'm going to start with you tonight, with a modern idea. What philosopher of modern times do you think most needs restoring? Deleuze? Possibly. Foucault? My money, it's Derrida. You see, Derrida is the philosopher who most people think is a pretentious idiot. But it's not quite so simple as that.
Not indeed.
You see, I actually earn my money, not as a stand-up thinker. There's no money in stand-up thinking. I earn my money as a maths teacher. Derrida is usually thought to be the most pretentious, difficult of all the most postmodern thinkers. Do you know why? The real reason I think why is that he dares to play the English at their own game. He has a sort of relativism based on writing. Truth, he'll say, is all really written down and there's no position outside the frame. Probably sounds hopeless. But let me explain how you could earn your living as a maths tutor as well this way. You see, what is it that people really don't understand about maths? When I have a 14-year-old who says, I can't do it, do you know what they can't do? They can't write. They tend to think that thinking is all about scratching your head and looking at a problem until it goes away or you've solved it. And nothing is further from the truth. What is real thinking? But kind of writing it down. And what is maths but a way of writing? Or a system of balances, of checks. You're plus on one side, you're minus on the other. And what is a fraction but a little timesing dividing machine? All my 14-year-olds, when they're pulling their eyes out, all I say is don't worry. Just learn how to write. Learn how to spell maths. Maths isn't a spoken language, it's a written one. And once they get that, they get so much about the hidden structure of equations, of algebra. I also tell them, which may or may not be true, that you couldn't have algebra until paper became cheap. They actually do happen at the same time. But there's something more. There's something more about thinking. Even when you're thinking about algebra. Writing sets you free, you see. What do I mean by that? Well, there's lots of sorts of freedoms in the world. There's kind of freedoms that aren't worth having, the kind of freedoms to make up your mind. We'll come back to that later. But I think real freedom exists in a courage to be wrong. To be able to say to yourself, I'm wrong, so what? Now, let's be careful here about the kind of wrong we're talking about. We're not talking about, oh, I'm so wrong! Nor are we talking about the, I'm wrong and somehow that's creative. We're talking about the kind of wrong that is, I'm wrong, but I'm going to get this right. I'm going to rethink it. And isn't that what writing allows you to do? To rethink what you've already done. To look at it afresh. And in that rethought, freedom lies. At least, that's how I explain it to 14-year-olds. I really do, too. For my next one, a bit of biography. I won't do this as the ideal bureau. I'll do this as a bit of biography. Back in May, my father died, which was sad, but it wasn't unexpected. But it meant I went to church for the first time in 25, 30 years. And I went to church repeatedly because he was a high church Anglican and they have a lot of services. And we had a requiem and it was all jolly nice. But it set me wondering about something. Something I really hadn't wondered about for so many years. What would prayer look like without God? I don't believe in God, but I quite like prayer. What might it be? Now, first things first, we need to clear this up. We're not talking kind of, oh God, that was awful, or thank God. Not those kind of little pagan chants we all do. Nor kind of great big pompous pretentious things that a card-carrying atheist would do. Kind of an atheist version of the Lord's Prayer. No. I mean real prayer. What is real prayer? But in attempting to understand yourself as part of the universe you're perceiving. Theologically, you would call that transubstantiation. Or understanding what it is to have a body that is yours, but somehow belongs to the universe. Consubstantiation. Both of them have a sort of a prayer to them. A sort of way of thinking how you are part of everything else. Caught in everything else. But if we're going to do prayer properly, I think, prayer should be dangerous. You see, you're never quite sure who you're praying to. Okay, your prayer won't be answered anyway, but you're never sure who it's to anyway. Prayer, then, should have a flip side. You might be praying to the devil. Now, I got myself going, and I kind of got myself all kind of thinking, oh, this is very clever. Now, one of the things I really like about philosophy, the thing I think I like most about it, is you're never the first to a good idea. And with prayer, there's actually a real philosophical gem who's clearly spent his entire life thinking about this. And this is one of those things you only realise when you're thinking about it the same. That philosopher is the one who set the tempo for 20th century thought, the first part of. I mean Heidegger. Heidegger spends his life thinking about different sorts of prayer, and he has various phrases of his life, and I'm going to present them to you now as different sorts of prayer. Different ways you might still pray, even if you don't believe in God. And we might call them inspiration, tradition, and revelation. Let me give you inspiration. Heidegger's masterwork as a young man, and he is quite young, he's 30, is a great book called Being and Time. It was the kind of book that a philosopher only writes once, and actually he claimed to have only written the first tenth of it. The rest of it never gets written. And central to that idea is this, that we've got decision wrong. When you're deciding something, everybody will say, you've got to decide to do what you want. But Heidegger will say, that's rubbish. How can you decide with what you want? Because if you know what you want, you'll decide. Real decision, real choice is very different. Choice happens in a moment of vision. He will call it the Augenblick. The moment, somehow, the present reforges the past and gives you a future. Choice, then, is to experience the world as Paul did on the road to Damascus, in a blinding light that changes everything, that makes you so different. Prayer is surely holding your mind open to such a moment. That's the first moment from Heidegger. The second is from a much darker period. Much later, 1936. Those of you who know about Heidegger will know that he flirted with National Socialism. He was a rector of a university in Heidelberg. And when he's just repudiating it, and he is one of the first to say it's rubbish, he starts to think about what is it that makes us as humans exist. What is the nature of being? And the nature of being, he'll say, is its very historicity. Now that might sound totally incomprehensible. Probably does. But what he really means by that is, as I am, I'm part of a great history. And my being is part of tradition. As in when you say the Lord's Prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, you are there now. You are there with the congregation. But you're there with the saints across the ages. And why does this matter to Heidegger? Well, simple. You see, what he's saying is that tradition shouldn't be seen as something staid. Tradition, we do this because we've always done it. It shouldn't be a prison. It should be a prism. Because isn't it in tradition that somehow we capture moments of change as they've happened? We somehow comprehend them in the past and learn to live what it might be to move into the future. Prayer, then, using the prayers of the past, the Eucharist, the Requiem of my Father's Mass, So familiar, so alien. In it, you could capture something of human history and feel its power. My final one is from right at the end of Heidegger's life, when he's become a curmudgeonly old man. And he was very curmudgeonly. He writes in an essay called What is Technology? Technology is a distortion. It is holding natural power in reserve. So the dam on the Rhine is an abomination. He didn't like technology, you might have guessed. But I also think he's really very wrong here. Because he gets technology wrong. He understands the nuclear bomb in terms, and he uses it as an example, in terms of humanity. What right does a human have to play God, he'll say. What right? But isn't the point about good technology is that it changes what it is to be human? As you are the man with the charge of the probably was a man in his day, in charge of the dam. You are part of the electric force. You are caught up in what it is and what it can do. So our society is caught up in what nature is extra allowing us to do. Real technology should challenge you as a person. Have you ever had that experience? Walking through Exeter, seeing all the levels of the land, seeing the cathedral, seeing modern buildings and old buildings, and somehow feeling a part of everything. A moment of revelation, where you don't have to be as you were. That, I think, would be my final instance of prayer. So what is prayer in the end? I think it's a way of thinking that doesn't involve comprehension so much as composition. Understanding what it really means to be hooked into and a part of everything else.